Welcome back to Efficio's Transforming Public Procurement Microcast, where we continue to break down the key elements of the new Procurement Act legislation. Following on from last week's discussion on supply exclusion and debarment, today I'm joined by Ollie Connolly, who's going to shed light on conditions of participation. So, Ollie, what are conditions of participation in a nutshell? It's not terminology I've heard before in this context.
Hi, Yehui, and thanks for having me on. Yes, put simply, the conditions of participation are essentially the requirements that suppliers must meet in order to bid for a public contract. They're a way to ensure that suppliers have the capacity and the ability to perform the contract. Specifically, they must be a proportionate means of ensuring that suppliers have the legal, financial, or technical ability to perform the contract being procured. If any of the conditions of participation are not satisfied, then the authority cannot award the contract to the supplier. For those who are familiar with the old regs, it's similar to the selection criteria, which existed under PCR 2015.
That makes sense. So tell me, what's changing and what's not?
So, as under the old regs, conditions of participation may be assessed on a pass-fail basis and/or, in the case of a competitive flex procedure, on a scored basis. Now, the Act introduces an element of flexibility into the qualification process, whilst also seeking to remove barriers typically faced by SMEs. The old regs set an exhaustive list of means of proof to assess technical and professional standards. In the new regs, there's no such list. The only requirement is that the conditions of participation is proportionate to the assessment and directly linked to the supplier's legal, technical, and financial capacity. So this allows for a wide range of evidence to be used. And this may be beneficial to SMEs who might struggle to provide that certain evidence previously.
Oh, what else is there?
So again, for those familiar with the old regs, this is similar to the pre-qualification questionnaire. What conditions of participation does is allow you to down-select your suppliers and therefore prevent you from inadvertently progressing a potential supplier who would not meet the minimum acceptable standard to be awarded a contract, saving you time in the long run.
That's really interesting, Ollie. I think the flexibility and removing barriers to SMEs is an especially interesting point. Do you think it's going to work?
I think there's definitely progress that has been made, and I believe we will see markets becoming more competitive as a result, which can only be a good thing. One other area that's changing is that authorities can no longer require suppliers to have in place insurance that relates to contract performance before the contract is awarded, preventing SMEs from incurring additional costs during the tendering stage. So this would be a great example of removing a barrier that typically discouraged SMEs from previously participating in a tender exercise.
Thank you, Ollie. That's a really useful breakdown as procurement teams who are used to the old regs start to get used to the new processes and nuances as we get closer to go live in February next year. I hope you enjoyed today's microcast. Please do post any thoughts or questions in the chat and get in touch with Ollie or myself for any future topics you might want to hear about. We will see you next week.